Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Hunter Wilds talk. With title update 4, we had two monsters we covered for weapon rankings. Of course, first was Gog, and then we had the arch-tempered version of Jin. But things were interesting with that Gog run. The involvement of support hunters for your runners, and pretty long run times like we saw with the initial Omega. Now people have really cracked the runs. We're seeing some significant improvements to these runs. So we want to take a look at these updated runs, but do more of a faster sort of flyby look just to highlight things. But I also want to reference some of the ridiculous stuff we've now seen from 4-player run times for this hunt. As usual, we don't allow heroics in these lists and always take them with a grain of salt. New runs come out every day, every other hour. So things may have changed even since I made this video. To kick us off though, we have Switch Axe, which is a bit of a problem run because we haven't really had a proper update for this weapon, which sucks because obviously it's a weapon that's had some serious changes in Title Update 4. We have seen some great runs for Sage and Dahaad, but for Gore, it's pretty much just been the initial runs and no one's been running nearly as much as I hoped we'd see. Either way, this remains one of the top runs. It's a 22-minute, 58-second clear, but solo using a Palico. The support hunters have a huge impact on the actual damage dealt to Gog, so you have to get through a lot more health as a solo player compared to when you bring support hunters, so it's still a very impressive run. And a pretty good detail there, where we're seeing a zero-sum discharge attach as Gog is flying up into the air for that last little bit of juice on the extremely weak to dragon period. But obviously, this doesn't represent the true potential of the weapon. For example, here's me with a 1934 when I was farming and not really paying attention that much, not pushing. So obviously, Switch Axe has solid potential in this fight, and I would love to see a serious run with support hunters involved, just so we can get a reasonable comparison. But with that said, let's move forward. Moving on then, we have the next run, which is Longsword, which is a 16-minute and 28-second clear. Once again, I do think the potential for this weapon is higher in this fight, but it's interesting to see how speedrunners are significantly less than normal running this fight, especially Longsword, which is, I think, one of the more popular speedrun weapons in my experience doing these lists. Is Longsword like a bad weapon for running Gog or something? No, definitely not. Your ability to do that Spirit Blade 1, Crimson 1 combo at a wing arm is really effective. We're also seeing some changes. We're seeing the Crimson combo all the way to 3 because of its better element scaling, so to pump the fire damage in this context, or maybe Dragon in phase 3. There are actually interesting changes that you see about Longsword in this fight. Because Gog is a slow, heavy hitting, not a lot of counter spam options monster, I do think maybe for that reason or others, Longsword runners just haven't been as interested in this fight, where we saw much of a resurgence for them with Jin Dahaad. So for the moment, one of the fastest times appears to be 16:28, but I do think the potential will be higher. 15 minutes or sub 15 minutes should easily be possible. Next up then we have Hammer, and this makes sense to me for it being, towards the lower end of the list. This is a 16-minute and 10-second clear, and from the different Hammer runs, this is actually a pretty decent run. Perhaps this is partly because you really want to focus damage into the wing arms here. And naturally, Hammer would ideally be hitting the head as much as possible so that you can build that KO and get those DPS windows that other weapons don't actually get. The current state of Hammer is pretty fantastic since its many major changes. We have seen quite a lot of spinning bludgeon like this in these moments for these shorter DPS windows. Like we said with Longsword, there are some little gameplay tweaks and changes that do occur for this monster specifically, which is interesting to watch and worth checking out if you're a Hammer runner and want to see how to maximize this fight. Do I think there's better potential for Hammer than a 1610? Yes, definitely. I do think, say, a 15-minute or sub 15-minute should be possible, but because of the nature of the fight, I don't think it's a very popular one for Hammer players, understandably. Jumping forward then, we have Greatsword with a respectable 15 minutes and 55-second clear with your support hunters. It's a sub 16. I think that's solid for this weapon. Some pretty cool stuff here though, where we're seeing the use of the shield from the Bale set. With the slow, heavy hits and slams, you can absolutely control this fight and get surprisingly good CC like we see here early on, which then can lead into more DPS at the wing arm or the head. But ultimately, you do have these charge up times where, fast, consistent DPS has been pretty telling in this fight. Breaking through with enough fire damage to actually get the oil falling off, getting these knockdowns. or any weapon that can get incredible element output, specifically in phase 3, doing a lot better than others, as we'll see. Next up then we have gunlance with the save 1526 clear, which was, to be fair, pretty insane when we talked about it last time, but now by comparison, a lot of other weapons have kind of overtaken gunlance. However, I will say that there was basically no gunlance runs that I could find with updated times. Once again, not a popular weapon for the runs for GOG specifically. Naturally, this runner has featured as a top gunlance runner time and time again in these weapon rankings since launch, actually. And so they are using absolutely incredible techniques to move around the target, but then again, you're dealing with these longer combos, the charge times, trying to hit the hit zone. GOG just feels very punishing if you're taking a while to put the hit out. But here's hoping we see some updated times in the future. I think, sub 15 should be possible also for gunlance. Now here's something that I find really impressive and exciting. Lance, with a 14 minute and 39 second clear with Sport Hunters. This is indeed a sub 15 minute run, and a decent time and ranking for Lance that's usually towards the back. This is obviously off the back of Title Update 4 and the changes that occurred, and every patch it feels like Lance gets like this wall of buffs, and a lot of them are just increased damage. Now obviously with these we saw improvements to say the triple poke, and also importantly the counter playstyle, which does work for GOG because obviously he's going for these slams and then you're able to counter that whatever. What we're seeing here though is what we've seen a bunch of different runs we talked about last time. So just to remind you, a lot of people, top runners, are actually not bringing their support hunters for phase 1 initially, just like we see with this Lance runner. The reason for that is the ridiculous environment damage, and then not wanting to faff around with pinging signal to get the hunters to come over. And then those support hunters are actually seemingly reaching the fight as we're actually at the third geyser. That's popping and has just clipped. So it's really efficient stuff that kind of doesn't really matter what weapon you're using. What I find interesting about this Lance is its ability to just go head to head with these attacks, get this kind of counter playstyle, and we're seeing these ticks of fire damage from massive numbers, right? Where they're doing that charge attack, which is really fun. You don't see that usually for actual DPS, but in the context of GOG and the element hit zones, and you wanting to get as many fast ticks off on the specific spot while it's briefly available, the wing arm in this case, the charge and the movement of that to get out of the way of an attack, get to the right hit zone, and actually get a load of these ticks off of fire, it's really cool. So definitely check this run out if you're a fan of Lance, and it's a great way to learn the fight for sure. Now, one weapon that makes a lot of sense for this fight to do well is, of course, the dual blades, with a 14 minute and 20 second clear time. But now, from this point on, we're going to notice that the times between runs are going to get a lot tighter. So less big jumps forward, but still some to come. Anyway, with dual blades, it makes sense. You're able to perfect evade the raw to immediately get to the wing arm, get charged up, and then obviously dump damage, the element damage specifically, into the arm. What's nice is the little movements, the little awkward nature of where these wing arms go, you can just completely ignore as a dual blades player because you've got the little movements with, say, your archdemon mode combos with the demon flurry, and then get straight into a blade dance for max DPS here, as we can see. Any weapon that is able to reliably hit the element into the right hit zone as much as possible goes a long way. We can see this as an example counter to the Lance, where the time spent running around popping the geysers, dropping the boulder isn't as necessary because they can output so much, they might as well get straight to it from the get-go. So it's been an obvious, easy choice, especially in my experience, playing dual blades, one of the easier weapons I've used to farm GOG, that's for sure. But now, a weapon that's had a massive jump forward in time, because we're finally starting to see some runners, which is obviously really nice. It's Insect Glaive with a 14 minute and 19 second clear. Something we were discussing with Insect Glaive, which did incredible with the Jin dahaad rankings, was exactly that, where you get the essence, you build it up, you dump it out on the attack. Can it hit the optimal hit zone? This is really important. Thankfully, Insect Glaive is able to pump damage pretty quick without the essence dump being the complete requirement, as we're talking about with a bunch of different weapons. Getting these many ticks of fire out and then getting the stun leads to the better DPS. But in this case, we have to wait until GOG is actually getting up to then dump the essence to get the maximum hit of that attack. There are examples in this specific run where things go a bit wrong, where I see an essence dump like this, where they get interrupted in the air and they're not able to get the full value of the hit zone. So I do think with a cleaner phase 1, as this fight obviously goes well from here on, maybe a sub 14 minute is possible. So here we are with Sword and Shield with a very impressive 13 minutes and 55 second clear. Our first sub 14 minute. This is insane on any weapon. And this is not even first, second or third or anything like that. So it goes to show what weapons are going to be particularly good if you're thinking about farming GOG and why. First up then is Sword and Shield, which is an obvious one. You're able to free flow around the target with minimal downtime. So that means you're able to constantly pump the element damage into the right hit zone, which in phase 1 is obviously a wing arm to get the early stun and maximize your DPS. Because with the environmentals, you can quickly fire off that pod, get the pop of the fire geyser, bring down, the boulder, and get the value here very easy without interrupting your flow. And with some good RNG and careful movement, you can pull him over the different environments. At very least, the first geyser and boulder drop, and then the second geyser as easily possible. As we see, it's slowly happening here. SNS, in my opinion, is one of the top choices you could go for this monster for learning it or just farming it efficiently and effectively. But the potential gets better, so let's move forward. Next up then is Charge Blade, and it's an obvious one for a top contender for this monster. Your ability to output so much element is incredible, but the only thing holding you back really is the charge time, the setup initially. From then on, as long as you maintain it, you've got it down. Anyway, what's super good about Charge Blade is his ability to output such insane element in big pumping damage at that. It's not as free-flowing as something like Dual Blades or SNS, but when it hits so unbelievably hard. So during phase 1, phase 2, you're going to see a lot of the AED into the follow-up, of course, and the changes to your speed at which you go into that perfect guard or the guard point from axe mode into Sword and Shield. It allows these slower and obvious attacks from GOG to be easily guardable, like so. But of course, where this really shines is in phase 3, once you swap to the dragon weapon and when you start to use SAED in actual runs, speed runs at that. That's why right there, the 1100 damage on the wing arm, not even when it's, charging up and exposed. So let's take a look at that moment where he's exposed and got the particularly weak element hit zones for dragon. See the SAED hit. How much damage are we popping? 1446. So the potential is absolutely crazy. If you're confident with Charge Blade, it's also an obvious top choice for this monster. To my surprise, but also not surprised at the same time, we have QUA with the returning Hunting Horn time next with a 13 minute and 41 second clear. So only 2 seconds faster than the last run, but this comes from the early time of GOG being the hyper speed run focus. Everyone then moved on to Jin and other targets since then, so runners are doing a lot less GOG, but we are looking at these updated lists. This one remains the top time for Hunting Horn. There are plenty of other runners that improved their times and got 1410s and stuff, so not far behind this, but QUA remains dominant as they have been for a lot of the history of Wild so far. But, there's going to be a strong theme about maximizing DPS in phase 3 and your ability to do that right now. So, first up, we have the next weapon of light bow gun with a 13 minute and 7 second clear. Just shy a sub 13, and I do think a sub 13 is possible if you have a perfect run or something. But the theme is about to begin. Ranged weapons and their ability to absolutely pump element damage throughout the whole hunt. Melee weapons can contend with the ranged weapons and their element output in phase 1 and definitely phase 2, which is super fast for every weapon. The little efficiencies of a ranged weapon though is its ability to stand where it wants to bait GOG over so that you can get the geyser pop, the boulder drop, and the next 2 geyser pops without actually dropping a beat, staying in optimal DPS and slowly lowering GOG with these forward momentum attacks like this. Super early knockdown, by the way, already set up near the second geyser. What happens at the start of phase 3 for most weapons, including melee especially, is grabbing the anti-wyvern guns and firing them off while standing near the boulder drop to get that initial one. Then when GOG comes flying over finally, you do this stage dive or whatever, get out of the way and drop the first boulder, and then it's back to DPS time. And where melee weapons are going to have a hard time focusing one specific target, be that one of the wing arms or the head, you can pick and choose as a ranged weapon the whole time, because they're all available and usually in that optimal DPS range. When we see GOG charged up and super vulnerable to the dragon, we see a pre-prepped gauge here to absolutely dump the dragon damage in, and it's 4 shots before the reload, but look at those numbers, man. Absolutely disgusting. So, jumping forward an unbelievable amount, we have heavy bowgun with a 12 minute and 23 second clear. Heavy bowgun is near the top here, but somehow not the top, as we'll discuss. Anyway, the first knockdown comes in at the start of phase 3, because obviously we want to look at that. And you see this ridiculous piercing damage as they dump the gauge, the initial gauge, all the way through that wing arm. Unlike everyone else who's going to that left boulder, it's at the right boulder where this happens. Then we get an evasion mantle, so all the attacks that are going to come out, they're going to intentionally roll them for that damage boost. And just like I said with light bowgun, you're able to just fire where you want into the optimal hit zone. This player's hyper-focusing the right wing arm and the head pretty much exclusively. It's honestly insane that this run is like 5 minutes, phase 1, phase 2, and then the rest goes to phase 3, but it's still so much faster than your other weapons. This is the moment when we're seeing another gauge dump, but obviously during the super dragon element weakness, just like the light bowgun. Unbelievable numbers, and they don't even have to really move over to the target, leaving them in a nice position for Fabius and, get ready for the next phase. But at the very top, we have Bow with a 12 minute and 6 second clear. Just barely shy the sub 12 minute clear. Absolutely ridiculous for someone on their own, even if, we're all talking about support hunters with Gog. It's honestly comical stuff. So there's the theme. The 3 ranged weapons being at the top with their ability to hit the hit zone they want to or they need to throughout the whole fight. Obviously the bow is super free flowing in this fight because every attack of Gog leads to the discerning dodge, which is just going to give them gauge, which is obviously just going to give them stamina recovery. They can just pump DPS the whole time. Super early knockdown. Unbelievable numbers being just spread out into the nice wide shot of the wide wing arm. It's just perfect with this positioning. And much like we saw with heavy bowgun, it's like 5 minutes for phase 1 and 2, and then we're straight into phase 3. Interestingly, just like them, they're over by the right boulder up on this cliff, drawing Gog into an early knockdown. It's really interesting. There's all kinds of cool details to look at here, like the fact that there's like 3 knockdowns before the first sort of super attack and the super vulnerable to dragon hit zone, the use of Dragon Piercer for a long range shot there, or how when we're finally getting that super dragon vulnerable moment, there's an arc shot here to set up the ticking DPS before then smashing up close. Is a sub 12 minute time possible? Honestly, with gameplay like this, I don't know. But the fact that we basically got a 12 minute run at all is insane. But now, as promised, a quick look at some fun stuff. You know how I talked about you can reach 6 minutes or less for a kill on Gog? Well, that's as a 4-player team that's super coordinated, doing unbelievable things. And with a weapon focus, it's really cool to see. This run is one of the top options you would have, which is 4 dual blades just pumping that element DPS into the target. So they get 1 knockdown, 2 knockdowns within the first few seconds of the run. This, as 4 dual blades then, is an incredible 6 minute and 2 second clear. So if you're thinking about doing a run with some friends, dual blades, 4 of you, is a great option. But what could be better? Well, we just talked about how bow achieved a 12 minute and 6 second clear, so 4 bows should be an obvious great choice. There's a cool detail about this as well, in that they're actually using the Omega group skill or set bonus, which is giving them power as they're close to each other or far away from each other. Initially then we get that first knockdown, then the second knockdown. It's just coordinated bullying of Gog, just like dual blades. This one isn't much faster though, like it might shock you to hear that. The 4 bow run is 5 minutes and 59 seconds, so only 3 seconds quicker. There's a third knockdown, by the way. It's ridiculous. But what's the fastest time possible? Well, it appears to be a bit of a mix. So you can see how this team opens with an unbelievable bullying of Gog using what appears to all be light bowguns. Interestingly, we're seeing dragon ammo being used here, so they're not relying entirely on fire damage. To be fair, they're getting the 2k pops of that geyser while the knockdown's going without putting any effort into it. Once they're done with the first wing arm, it's straight to the head, and then they go back to the camp to change things up. So as phase 2 begins, this player is using a hunting horn to buff up, which makes sense, why not take the buffs? But then for the DPS, they are back to the light bowgun to continuously pump that. In no time, the cannon is ready and fired then, and then it's back to the camp for another swap. Amazingly, the team is actually going for Gog during the transition from phase 2 to 3, where they're bringing out charge blades to actually get the weapon going. So just by making that swap and change quick enough, he's able to get his shield charge just barely in time for the transition up to the top floor. Really cool stuff. Where of course they're pumping unbelievable dragon element into Gog this whole time as a pack of bullying charge blades. And yes, they're using SAED even when it's not like super vulnerable as you would do yourself. So you're getting these big pops of 1,300 from each of these players 4 times, right? All of them just smashing the same wing arm. So the hunt ends here before we even see the first vulnerability. What would that look like? I guess we'll never know. But as you can see, it leads to a 4-minute and 34-second clear. But yeah, there you have it. That's my updated overview of Gog. Overall, most weapons have had massive jumps forward, and we've had a real reordering of the list, which is cool to see. Some weapons definitely could use some attention, like Switch Axe, and I'd love to see what their actual potential is against Gog. But something that has happened a lot during these runs is these group hunts and the insane times we're seeing from that. And the strategies within that being different, also really cool. Please check the description or go check out these runners. And if you enjoyed the video, do drop a like. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.